This video might make me look like a hypocrite, but just please let me explain. So as we all know, HBO is, well, I was gonna say it's a trash fire, but that would at least give me some hope of seeing Brendan Fraser as a super arsonist someday. HBO is killing projects left and right like an ambidextrous assassin of all things fun and good, and their main target seems to be animation. This massacre started with the cancellation of Scoob Holiday Haunt, which apparently was the thread on which the Sword of Damocles was hanging, because afterward it fell harder than their stock prices onto nearly every cartoon project in the works. Here is a list of all the animated shows and movies that Warner Bros. Discovery has recently canceled and taken off their platform. Watch them scroll by like a track list for an early 2000s commercial for Now That's What I Call a Bummer. Okay, to be completely honest, I've not seen most of these shows, and at least some of them I have no interest in watching. I don't know who was asking for Little Ellen, especially following the last comedian who had a cartoon show about him as a little kid turned out to be not great. But for the rest of these shows, I was gonna get to them eventually, and now I can't, and now they're gone. Now this is when some people would start praising physical media. You never know when a boner like this is gonna happen, so making sure that you have tangible copies of your favorite shows and movies is vital. And that's fair enough, but what about the shows and movies that have never received a physical release? Like streaming exclusive content that could just disappear overnight when someone decides to pull that plug. Yo ho ho, an 18th century galleon just Tokyo drifted into port with what they believe is the solution to this problem: piracy. That is how we preserve media when corporations won't. And look, when Amazon did their own blunder earlier this year by making the digital comics landscape a truly awful experience for pretty much everyone, I was on record by saying that while I don't condone piracy, I certainly do understand why some people would gravitate toward it when using a legitimate service becomes increasingly cumbersome. God, that was a sentence with over 50 words in it. Someone please help me. So it might come as a surprise, or again, even make me look a little hypocritical when I say that no, piracy is not the solution here. At least, not as much as people think it is.
So this video isn't sponsored by anyone, but if you like what I do and you like more Scooby-Doo content for this month, it would be really nice and helpful if you supported me over on Patreon. Isn't that right, bud? He's got some thoughts about it.
How are you doing, you wonderful nerds? Scott here, and I know that this HBO news is old by internet standards, but I'm in the process of making a couple big, intricate videos that are taking up so much of my time. I just need to make something a little bit simpler this week. On that note, thank you to everyone who watches my goofier stuff, like the reactions I've been doing with my internet pals. I have a clock that makes bird sounds every hour, which is an ADHD technique to make me more cognizant of what time of day it is. It's 5 p.m. now. Thanks. What is it? I'm still learning all the bird noises. I believe that was a tuft titmouse. I hope that's even the name of a bird, or else I'm gonna get demonetized real quick, huh? Anyway, as I was saying, thank you to everyone who watches my goofier stuff, like the reactions I've been doing with my internet pals. I know the VeggieTales video I did with Maddie from Watchtower Database was super well received, and that makes me just really happy. So get subscribed, takes like 2 seconds, and it makes my serotonin go woo! So these changes in programming connect with the larger merger of Warner Brothers and Discovery into Warner Brothers Discovery. I tend to shorten it to just Warner's Discovery. It's too many words. And I took out the shortest word. I could just call it Bros. And this is all part of their plan to merge Discovery Plus and HBO Max into one unified streaming service sometime next year in the US. One HBO Max spokesperson said, quote, "As we work toward bringing our content catalogs under one platform, we will be making changes to the content offering available on both HBO Max and Discovery Plus. That will include the removal of some content from both platforms. Specifically, they'll be taking a departure from family and children-focused programming, which is not exclusively where cartoons reside, right? We all know that animation is a medium through which you can tell any story that you want. But there's still, to this day, a pretty big overlap between cartoons and all ages shows. And this unfortunately means that HBO slashed at least 25 animated titles without warning or giving a heads up to the people actually working on these shows. In response to these changes, Warner's Discovery has rapidly eroded trust from longtime creatives within the animation industry. Rightfully so, I would say. The folks behind Infinity Train, for example, have been super vocal about their disdain for Warner's Discovery's abrupt and underhanded shift in programming, as the show was not just removed from HBO Max, but every episode was also taken down from Cartoon Network's YouTube channel, and the soundtrack is no longer available to stream on any music platform. And also, any new DVDs of the series are no longer available for purchase. And I mean, it just feels like this change runs counter to the long history of fostering animation talents, as Warner Brothers was once considered an innovator in the field of animation since the 1930s with Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes. Speaking of the 90s though, Cartoon Network, literally an entire channel dedicated to classic cartoons that would also give us new gems, like that one show with all the scary stuff in it. Well, no, that's good too, but it had like kids in it as well. But it was like kids being hunted down by the scary stuff. Right, The Othersiders. Oh, why did they make that show? Are these kids okay? So why is WB doing a full heel turn here and treating animation and animators like they're disposable? There are many theories out there, but I kind of want to debunk one that I've seen, the most prominent one. This idea that Warner's Discovery is canceling and removing content from their platform because then they won't have to pay residuals to the folks who worked on these shows and movies. This theory has been thrown out there a lot on the internet, and I want to really dive into it, but it's a tad complicated, so let me explain. Owen Dennis, creator of Infinity Train and previously writer and storyboard artist for Regular Show, wrote about this on his blog, which is where a lot of the outlets have cited this idea. As he explains, when you work on a movie or show, you are, ideally anyway, paid for the labor that contributed to that art being made, but, and enormous but here, that only covers some of the expected income. That last but crucial part of the payment structure is ongoing residuals. Residuals are money paid to, I don't know why I said it like that. Residuals are money paid to actors, writers, directors, etc. when a work is syndicated or a TV show airs reruns or when someone buys a new VHS copy of Jurassic Park. Basically, if studios are still profiting off of movies and shows, the people who made those movies and shows should also get some of the bread. It sounds like an obviously fair thing, but artists have had to fight for any kind of compensation for decades. It's definitely not perfect as is, which I'll touch on in a minute, but the only reason their negotiations got anywhere is thanks to unionization and strikes. Turns out, those are good and helpful things. Who knew? This is vital information because, as Dennis points out in his blog post, residuals aren't paid directly to the artist, at least not all of the time. It's tricky, and I'm not in the industry, so I don't really know, but at least from a little bit of research I did, I believe a percentage of the artist's residuals does have to go to the union to pay for artists' healthcare and pension plans. Now, unless you are one of the friends, your individual residuals probably won't add up to much more than being a fun phrase to say out loud. Individual residuals. However, a report by CNBC estimated that if Warner's Discovery is purposely trying to avoid paying residuals to all of the shows they cut from their platform, if you add it all together, it could save Discovery somewhere in the ballpark of tens of millions of dollars. Now, this is certainly a juicy accusation and paints Warner's Discovery in a sinister light, which is why I really hate to do this next part of the video, but I don't think it's true, at least not fully. Sorry. I mean, for one thing, if we're just focusing on animation here, which is what we're doing in this video, residuals don't actually pay for pension and healthcare plans for those in the Animation Guild, specifically the way that it would for other unions like SAG-AFTRA. Other unions would probably be affected by this, which does suck, but it sounds like maybe less so for animators. In fact, the Animation Guild issued a statement specifically about this, saying, quote, Warner Brothers Discovery is not attempting to avoid any obligations it has to tag members and the motion picture industry by these actions. My personal take, I think people are seeing this situation and trying to paint Warner Brothers Discovery specifically in this uniquely ghoulish light as a big corporation that doesn't care about animation or animators, when the reality is that the entire industry doesn't care about animation and animators, and this is just one additional example of it out of countless, right? Like according to Variety, animation writers make about half as much as writers of live action shows. Half as much. That is not a pay gap, that is a pay canyon. So you would think then that if Warner's Discovery needed to save a whole bunch of money, they would invest in more animated shows, because then they don't have to pay people as much. Please pay people what they're worth, though, actually. Speaking of saving money, remember how I said that cutting the residuals could save Warner's Discovery around $10 million? Well, that does sound like a lot, and for sure it would hugely benefit the artists who were working on these shows, but $10 million in savings is nothing to Warner Brothers Discovery. I mean, the entire reason that the new head of Warner's Discovery is making all of these drastic changes is because they need to find $3 billion in savings. $10 million is about 1/3% of that. They spent 9 times as much making a Batgirl movie they didn't even release. By the way, I recently interviewed a VFX artist who, for legal reasons, I'll say, didn't work on the Batgirl film, and I'm gonna have a video about his experience with that whole situation up on this channel soon, so subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. My main point is a couple $1 million lost is really inconsequential to the 5 or so giant corporations who own pretty much all of art right now, and this ties into the bigger issue. In his blog post, Owen Dennis asks a really big question that tons of people have been discussing online regarding HBO Max removing shows from their platform. If a giant corporation has stopped you from having the ability to access art, is it okay for you to watch a copy that doesn't funnel any money toward them, doesn't create scarcity of the art, and doesn't make a mark on some algorithm's metrics? Now, he does say some points that I agree with here, but I think he whiffs it on a crucial part of the discussion. He brings up piracy as not just a way to access art around which corporations have created artificial scarcity, but he also goes on to say that piracy is, quote, preservation of our history. I disagree. This is gonna get extremely pedantic, but in this case, I do think pedantry is important. There is a massive, massive difference between access to art and preservation of art. And we shouldn't conflate those two things. I wanna shout out this fantastic and also criminally underviewed thread by Mr. BeNatural 10 on Twitter about this issue. I'll have that linked in the description if you wanna read it. But in short, just because something is accessible doesn't mean it's preserved. And just because something is preserved obviously doesn't make it accessible. Sometimes, yeah, you can have both of those things, right? Tons of silent era films were destroyed in vault fires, and I'm sure we're all familiar with the many early Doctor Who episodes that were just taped over and are now lost forever. Well, I guess we're not familiar with them, are we? So in those cases, media can be both unpreserved and inaccessible, unfortunately, but there are also tons of films and television shows that are inaccessible to the public, largely due to being stuck in rights hell, but they are still preserved somewhere. Like, you remember how Disney would only sell their movies for like short stints of time and then they would lock them away in the Disney vault so you couldn't buy them again until they were re-released like a decade later? Same concept, right? In fact, the Wikipedia page for the Disney vault also helpfully suggests that we see also artificial scarcity. Also, oh my god, I thought the Disney Vault was just a thing that they did in the 80s and 90s, but they were apparently still doing it until Disney Plus launched like 3 years ago. Toy Story 3 was locked in the Disney Vault? That feels weird to me. Is that weird? It's weird, right? Anyway, a massive player in this whole conversation is the Copyright Office at the Library of Congress, which means, yeah, we're unfortunately gonna have to talk about copyright law again, which is a thing that I do way too much on this channel. But first, I'm gonna need some tea. The tea I'm gonna be drinking today is Key Lime LaCroix. I'm too lazy to brew tea right now, so I'm just doing this. But you can send me tea to my P.O. box, link in the description. So strange, drinking seltzer out of a mug. It feels like I shouldn't be doing this. Back to the thing, back to the topic. Okay, so Section 408 of the 1976 Copyright Act made it so technically registration of a work with the United States Copyright Office wasn't a prerequisite of copyright protection. In other words, to put it simply, you don't actually need to register your work with the Copyright Office for it to have copyright protection. However, Section 411 of that same act does require registration before copyright infringement action by the creator of the work can proceed. So, for example, and I know this is difficult to imagine, but if there was a giant media corporation that was a big dang stickler for protecting their IP above all else to the point of being extremely litigious, it would be in their best interest to register every single one of their works with the Copyright Office at the Library of Congress, because if they want to sue, they must do the thing with the thing that I said, with the register. They have to register their work, basically. And hey, guess what? For a work to be registered with the Copyright Office, the act requires at least one copy of the work has to be deposited into the library. 2 copies if that work is published. So as much as I hate copyright law, which is a lot, by the way, at the very least it has played into the white-knuckled grip that corporations have on their franchises to the point of effectively forcing them to preserve everything. They don't have to, technically they don't have to. But they're gonna, because they want to sue people so bad. I bring this up because this shows the difference between access and preservation. There is a ton of media at this office that is inaccessible to the public, but it is being preserved, at least as best as it can. Admittedly, it is a bit of a mess, or at least it has been in the past. Hopefully it's gotten better, but some media is on film, some is on tape, some are on digital cinema packages, on hard drives, and some are on DVD-Rs that presumably look a lot like an early 2000s road trip mix CD my brother burned for me on LimeWire, because I couldn't figure out how to do it myself. But I would never do it myself, because that's stealing. You wouldn't download music, would you? Which brings us back to piracy. While there are still issues with official media preservation, like the deterioration of physical media and the backwards compatibility of digital media, piracy doesn't actually address either of these issues. Hard drives still fail, cloud storage and servers that host these media files could disappear without any warning, and heck, I'll say it, most of the time, these media files are not preservation quality. It's real poopy sometimes. But to a lot of people, myself included, sometimes that's fine. I've talked in length about how difficult it is for me to find copies of the 1966 Marvel superheroes cartoons here in the States. Other countries can't get rid of these DVDs. I wish I was there in those places. Somewhere out there exists the best, highest quality masters of these cartoons. Do I want it? Yes. Would I pay a laughably large sum of money to get my hands on it? Depends on how well the Patreon is doing. Let's get to 1,000 patrons, people. Link in the description. Until then, if I want to watch this cartoon that Disney has not made easily accessible, oftentimes my only solution is a version that someone has hastily thrown up on archive.org, for example, that looks like it's made of about 12 pixels max. And that is not preservation. It's purely access, and I appreciate it, don't get me wrong. I think corporations and streaming services that make their own content inaccessible to the public when it's just sitting there on a hard drive somewhere, perfectly able to be viewed by anyone who wants it, is bullshit, to be completely honest. Absolutely call it out. I'm glad that there are people out there making inaccessible media more accessible. Moreover, it still doesn't address the issue of compensation to the artists themselves. Even though in the world of animation, residuals may not pay for health insurance and retirement plans, it does for other guilds. And regardless, the animators should still be getting the residuals anyway. But piracy doesn't help with that either. What is the solution here? I don't know. I never claimed to know. I just wanted to throw my thoughts into this conversation. Access to art, I feel, is important. Preservation of art, also important. Artists being paid for their work. Hey, look, a third important thing. It just feels like there are 3 different parts of a larger conversation that have ballooned into one without really considering the nuances of how they each interact and affect each other. And I certainly don't know everything. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff I got wrong here, so I would like to continue having this conversation in the comments or over on Twitter and Instagram at NerdSync or my personal account, Scott Niswander. I'm a little bit more active there. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new to my videos, this is sort of the thing that I do. I talk for a long time about something incredibly niche, but along the way, I hope we learn a little bit about the world and maybe about ourselves. So if that sounds good to you, subscribe and turn on notifications to become a wonderful nerd. That's what I call my fans and followers. I think it's cute. If you are feeling extra generous, please support me on Patreon. I would love to hit 1,000 patrons this year with names like Marisa Wilson, Amanda Trisdale, Brendan, Christopher Lang, DeCassowary, Emma DeNB, Jacob Rundell, Jonathan Lanowski, Carl Bachman, this is a new one to me, Carl Bachman, Ira Narson, Rebecca Moss, William Talotzin, A Filthy Casual, BKBW, Blake Isan, C. McCartney Smith, Eric Ketchum, Eric Totoropato, Jonathan and Megan Pearson, Mar Sottledine, Pete Temple, and the rest of the wonderful nerds over at patreon.com/nerdsync. Link in the description. Once again, my name is Scott, reminding you to explore your favorite art through curiosity and vulnerability. See ya.